What is up, Internet basketball junkies? Welcome back to our advanced coaching course where we're diving into the systems, the structures, the philosophies that help coaches build not just good basketball teams, but build strong, sustainable basketball programs. Today I'm joined by Coach Kramer, and we're breaking down one of my favorite resources that I've ever created, high school basketball architecture, a blueprint for the 5 electives that I would install if I were taking over a high school basketball program. These aren't the mandatory pieces of running a basketball program. You don't need them to have a basketball team, but if you do them and you do them well, you create momentum, identify, and create enthusiasm far beyond a single season. So you're laying the groundwork for building a powerhouse basketball program. So in this session, we're going to unpack a few things here. The first is a little dribblers program that builds a future pipeline for your basketball program. Second would be a tip-off dinner that unites your players and your family and your community. We're going to talk about a shooting league to raise the skill development outside of your normal practice windows. And we're going to talk about program pillars that anchor your culture and make your standards more clear, and among other things. But we're going to talk about how these electives reach the deeper layers of your program, your youth program, your JV, your varsity, your parents, your communities. All these people are going to get involved in these things we're going to talk about here today. So this isn't about wins and losses. This is about creating a program that has roots to it. A program that feels organized, is exciting, and meaningful from the top to the bottom. So whether you're taking over a new job or trying to elevate an existing one, these electives are the kind of long-term moves that build consistency, buy-in, and sustain success. So we're going to get into our architecture document now. We'll go through it piece by piece and layer by layer. Coach Kramer, thanks so much for jumping on the call here to talk about these things.
Yeah, I think this is a great one. Again, I mean, it's always an honor, really, to come on and talk with you, Coach Hack. So much respect for the things that you've done in your career, and it's again, every time I come on, I like to share ideas. But one of the things that I would like to say to the audience is I also learn new things every time I'm on here with you as well. And I think that's a notable, right? 32 years in the coaching profession, and not one time have I ever sat down with you and walked away and not thought, wow, what I mean? That's a great idea. I'd consider that. And so it's interesting to see where this goes.
Well, you've got quite the experience coaching high school basketball. And for me, it's leaning on the experience of people like you and Coach Montgomery and all my other coaching mentors that I have. So I might not have as much experience as you, but I've been able to pick the brains of a lot of sharp coaches, and that's how I bring a lot of these ideas to our listeners here today. But kind of some lead-in questions before we get into the actual document. Did you really consider yourself a program builder as a high school basketball head coach?
I mean, I made a career out of that, Matt. I took over several programs, during my career, and right now I'm not coaching by choice. It doesn't mean I won't coach again. But what I would never do is I would never accept a job if I wasn't going to try to build the entire program. Of the programs that I took over, the 5, 4 of them were in really, really bad shape. And so I knew what I was getting into when I took them, and I didn't shy away from them because I've never been one to reflect on my win-loss record as kind of the ultimate, evaluator of my value as a coach. It's always been what I could do to elevate a program, and then the one program in Georgia that I took over that was very high level. I had high major prospects, mid-major prospects there, but we were playing a national schedule. And even that program, the year before I got there, had those same players and went 12-13 in a 25-game schedule. So, I never stepped into a job where I thought, man, this is going to be easy, and I'm going to try to hit and run here, maybe win 20 games and see if I can elevate my name and go get another job. Every job I've taken with the idea that I'm going to be there long term. And I think that that's kind of the way you have to do it. Otherwise, again, we say this all the time. People say it different ways. if you aren't where your feet are in this coaching profession, then you're not going to last very long. So, to answer your question, the short version is absolutely. I mean, that's what I do, and I really think that that's what basketball coaches in high school sign up to do when they decide to be high school basketball coaches.
Yeah, program building to me, that's what really excites me about being a high school basketball coach. There's a trend nowadays where, NIL and transfer, where you can build up these programs real quick and you can leave them high and dry real quick. We've seen a lot of that in Ohio, probably the last 10 or 15 years. I don't have much interest in that. I'm always interested in getting into the lower levels, establishing a community support to a program and seeing what we can kind of build organically. And if a kid transfers in or transfers out, I'd like to be able to build something that's strong enough to handle that and not be relying on kids coming in or if a kid leaves or not. So when you took over your first high school basketball program, Coach, is there anything that you think that you would have wanted to do earlier in that stint, get in place sooner to help you build that program up? Where was
Yeah, that's a great question. And honestly, my first job is probably the one I'm most fond of. Just because it was where I was the longest. And again, we're going to talk about regrets in coaching, but if I could do it over again, I may have never left there because by the end of the 8 years that I was there, forget about the wins, and they were happening, right? There was just so much established, and the things that you're talking about, we weren't just a basketball program anymore. We were a part of the community, and we were a part of the community 365 days a year because we were constantly offering things for kids in our program from kindergarten on up. And so we were highly visible. And then because of that, we were also highly visible in the community, doing different things in that community that was off the court, that was, just things that shined well, shine a positive light on our program. And those things don't happen overnight. So back to your question, I got hired actually while I was on vacation in July of the summer of 2000. And so the summer was already gone. It was late July. So by the time I got back from vacation, it was 2 or 3 days later, it was August. And I didn't really have a chance to start doing a lot of these things my first year. But I will tell you this, because of working with I consider to be one of the great high school basketball coaches in the history of Northeast Ohio, Henry Cobb for 7 years. I think he's a name that sometimes gets forgotten. That guy was as good as it gets. And he was really good at program building too. And then the friendship that I made with Randy Montgomery when I was a young coach, and his willingness to kind of share some of the things that he did to get things started at his powerhouse programs that he built at Triway and North Canton Hoover. I was jumping into some of these things you're going to talk about pretty quick. Now, how well I was implementing them, that's a different story, right? But I was very aware before I took my first head coaching job that being a head high school basketball coach was far more than coaching high school basketball. It was a much bigger job. So I went into it with the idea that I was going to start doing some of these things right away.
Yeah, you talked about, you'd built something at Fairless that you regret leaving to an extent. And ideally, I think that's what you want to do as a basketball coach. You want to lay your roots down. So that's pulling at you if it's time to make a decision to go to another school, where that you have a track record that you're proud of, that you have all of these things in place that are hard, that make it hard for you to leave. So I think, a coach that's doing it the right way is really putting those roots down in the ground. Coach, when we're thinking about program building, we're talking about all the off the court stuff that goes into making a program successful. If you had to pick one elective, it could be one of the things we're going to talk about, the little dribblers, the tip-off dinner, shooting league, something like that. Or it could be something else that you've seen another coach do. Which would you pick first and why?
Wow, man, that is a really tough one because I hate to marginalize some of the other things I did, and I modified the little dribblers, so I'm going to give you this with a grain of salt. I think it would be the little dribblers would be my number one, just because it is so important, and I would say even more important now than it was back then, to draw kids in at an early age because of all the extra things that kids now have to do off the court. I mean, let's just be honest, and I can't speak for your childhood, but when I was a kid, I mean, there was nothing better than going to the gym. You know, we didn't have a handheld computer in an arcade at our disposal with a press of a thumb on a button in something that we could hold in our hands. So, I mean, those are the things we did. And you didn't have to tease us into a gym. But nowadays, if you don't get the attention of kids early, there's so many other things vying for their attention. They're going to find other things to do, and you're going to be stuck with some really dead classes. So I would say it's the little dribblers, and I would say it's reaching down as far as you know, first grade kindergartners, you know, getting them involved in some really simple things that put a basketball in their hand, so that you make sure that you know that you're continuing to draw kids into your program and build skill and teach them a love for the game, you know, before trainers and things get a hold of them and turn it into drudgery, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So obviously, I'm a fan of little dribblers too, since it's made my top 5. And the way that I've framed this when I wrote it was, you know, if I were taking over a high school basketball program today, these are the 5 things that I would implement. So obviously, when you're taking over a high school basketball program, there's a lot going on. There's a lot of things that you need to do. But I would be getting with my parent group, and I would be getting with my coaches, and I would be mapping out these 5 things for sure, because they have the biggest results long term. So getting them in as foundational pieces early on makes such a huge difference. And when you get to year 3 or year 4, if you've had these things up and running for multiple years, you're going to see massive, massive dividends. So we'll get into the 5 things. And the first one that we're going to talk about is a shooting league. And there's several different ways to structure this. Do you have much experience in your coaching career with running shooting leagues?
No, you know what? I'm interested to see what you do here. I mean, we had a definite shooting program that we worked in our daily skills sessions during the summertime, during the preseason, during the season, during the off season. We were very committed to that. We would always, you know, we work our partner lock-in shooting and then some other things into that in various ways that I outline in that item that I offer at your store. But you know, we also always tested our kids on a 50 and 5 in the summertime. That's a John Beeline thing back when he was at West Virginia, which is essentially being able to make 50 or more 3-point shots with a rebounder in 5 minutes. It's a grueling test of, you know, skill and mental toughness and even some conditioning. So those are some things that we believed in deeply, and it produced a number of really, really good shooters. But I'm interested to hear a little bit more about your shooting league concept here, Coach.
Yeah, so what we're talking about here is a little bit more broad. And of course, at the varsity level, you're going to have your pet shooting drills and you're going to have an emphasis in shooting. But what we're talking about here is running like you would run a summer camp. You would run a clinic style, focused all on shooting. And you can run it through the off season, and you could run one in the fall. You could run one in the summer. You could run one in the spring. But we're talking about off-season programming that's getting kids involved with the explicit purpose of getting a lot of shooting reps up. And the reason that this is so important is because shooting is just such an invaluable skill. So when you're talking about whatever philosophy you choose, if you're going to be a press defense coach or a motion offense coach or set plays or conceptual, it doesn't matter what you run. If at the end of the possession, the ball is in the hands of somebody who can shoot it from outside with confidence, it opens everything else up. So if you don't have shooting, then you're permanently trying to get the ball to the inside, and the opponent knows that. So they're going to be able to stack their defense to take that away. But if you can provide gravity for any inside game, whether you're going to do that through the post or through a dribble penetration game, having the perimeter stocked with people that have taken thousands and thousands of tracked shots throughout their lifetime, it's going to be hard for the defense to pick and choose what they're going to deploy their resources for. So shooting league here, are you with me in terms of just the skill of shooting being so important in terms of whatever philosophy you pick and it being able to open things up for everybody else?
Yeah, I mean, you're asking the wrong guy because I'm biased. I mean, I think that it's essential. I always hear people say, you know, defense wins championships, and I cringe, not because I'm not a defensive guy, but because there's nothing more frustrating than being a really good defensive team and not being able to score. You don't win championships without being able to put the ball in the basket. And I would pose that argument with anybody that wants to have it. And again, I'm not marginalizing the importance of defense, but like I think that again, the game becomes very difficult to coach when you don't have shot makers, and it becomes a lot of fun to coach when you do. So I feel like I've answered that question with a resounding yes when it comes to the emphasis that I would place on shooting.
So, but before we get into looking at this document here that kind of outlines what we're talking about with a shooting camp or a shooting league, I just want you to imagine a scenario where you've put an emphasis on shooting in your program. The kids that were there in 6th or 7th grade when you took over the program are now juniors and seniors, and they've got tracked reps all the way up. They've known that this is a point of emphasis in your program, and they are locked and loaded with great shooting technique and a lot of volume behind it. I think if you're imagining that scenario, you're feeling really good about your prospects as a basketball team just because you have a foundational piece of shooting the basketball that's going to extend into everything else.
I'm in. I mean, you listen. I'm an easy sell on this one. I'm all about this. I mean, if I were to lead another program, and it's funny, I wish I could show you. I got a text from a player of mine off that 2007 Fairless team that I was just talking about 20 minutes before we went on air, asking me about, do I still run our single conceptual offense, because he wanted to pick my brain a little bit. And I told him, you can pick my brain all you want. I said, Brian, but the reason that stuff worked is because you guys were highly skilled shooters and passers, right? So like I said, if I were to start a program tomorrow, I'd want to know more about what you're doing right now, and I'd want to start doing it tomorrow.
Okay, so we're looking at a sign-up form for an actual shooting camp or shooting league. And what I like here is we've got the records for three-point shooting, which is going to put this in the players' minds, even at the younger grades, where they understand a record that could be broken if they really put their mind to developing as a shooter, as well as a individual three-point shooting percentage. So you're kind of establishing a goal for players to be able to envision themselves as elite three-point shooters. And now we're getting into kind of the structure. So what we're looking at here is a shooting camp, which is what you would run probably once in off season, where you're really training the technique of shooting. So it's a lot of instruction in a large group setting where you're teaching your younger players stuff, maybe even like beef or very foundational things. Mm-hmm. Or at your upper levels, you're working on more of shooting footwork, or how to posture yourself as you're waiting for a pass, shot mechanics, those kind of things. So each year you're giving tailored instructions specific to shooting, and then you would transfer that to your shooting league. So your shooting league, you could run like a summer camp where it's all week long, and they would come in and do their shooting Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. So it would be like a summer camp, but with the emphasis mostly on shooting instead of playing the game or a broader look at the game. But what I like to do when I ran these was we would do like one day a week and run it through the whole fall or run it through the whole summer. So a player could sign up for a session in the fall, and then they would have dedicated gym times where every Monday at 7:00 they're meeting and they're executing their shooting work, and that's all gonna be charted, and that's all gonna be tracked, put into a spreadsheet, and all of that. So by breaking it down like this, you can then have competition inside your program based on the grade levels, where you're tracking all this data, and it ends in kind of a tournament where your top shooters get into a tournament, and you're building this thing up all around shooting, where there's an emphasis on shooting, and there's a competitive nature to see who's the best and can produce the best results. And what the interesting thing here is, we've talked to this point about this being a foundational piece of skill building, where you're hanging your hat on being a shooting program, and you're emphasizing it in all these things that you do throughout the off season. But once you get good participation levels and get this program ingrained, it can really turn into a fundraiser for your program. So you're not only building a skill that's going to aid your program, you can also bring some revenue in, which you could decide to do whatever you want with. Are you with me so far on the shooting league concept, Coach?
I'm all in, man. I'm all ears. I'm all learner here right now, Coach.
So we're looking at, this is Coach Pato's document. So he was running this at Westlake. He shared it with me, and this is the exact form that they would use. He's going to give the kids a T-shirt, every kid that participates, and it's going to culminate in this tournament. So you might even have like a trophy that you're engraving year over year on who the winners were of the shooting league. But can you see this as something that could be very enthusiastically received by your community if you're executing it year over year?
I mean, I love this, and I can't believe that Chad Pato came up with this. Is this his idea? I mean, I hope he's watching. I had to take a shot at him. I worked with Chad for a year, so again, I know he's an excellent coach and good at organizing these types of things too. He's actually really good at it. I really like this. I mean, I think it's great. I mean, to kind of piggyback that, without this league, our 50-5 thing that we tested our players on everywhere I've been, we just had T-shirts made, and they said 50-5 on the back of them, and they had our logo on the front or whatever, and kids aspire to that. I mean, you saw kids really going after those T-shirts. You know what I mean? It meant something. I mean, I just think that this takes that and magnifies it exponentially. Turns it into something even bigger. So yeah, I think it's fantastic.
Yeah. So if we're talking about an individual session, and obviously these would need structured around your community, your specific gym space, how many kids that you have. So you could take as much of this as you can to copy it, but it's really community specific based on, what you can do. But if we were talking about a sample shooting clinic, this is what it might look at, where we're doing an introduction to shooting and some stretching. We're getting some technique work, some technique and instruction work. We're playing some icebreaker games. We're doing form shooting. We're teaching an individual drill. We're teaching a partner shooting drill. We're playing a shooting game. And through 90 minutes, you're giving instruction, but you're also teaching players how to work on their shooting outside of when they're in the gym with you. So you give them these drills that they can do by themselves, or drills that they can do with a partner, or games that they can play to try to beat a high score. And then you can assign them homework where, there's a game called 32s. Have you heard of 32s, Coach?
I have, but it's been a minute. Refresh.
32s is basically you're going through 5 spots. You're going to start with a free throw, but then you're shooting a 3-pointer, a mid-range, and a layup at each spot, and then moving on to the next one. And you're trying a perfect score would be 32. But
Gotcha.
At the end of this session, you might be assigning shooting homework, which would be you need to do 10 reps of 32 shooting on your own before we meet here next time. So you're not only putting this focus on the kids in the gym with you, but you're also extending that into them working on their own when they're outside of the gym.
I mean, I think that's fantastic. And I think that the point that you hit on that was key to me, and this is a conversation I've had with, dozens of kids over the years. We can work on your shooting here with you in the gym, but that's not what's going to make you a great shooter. It's going to help you, but it's the work you do by yourself that really turns a shooter into a great shooter. And when a parent comes to me and asks, hey, that kid's a great shooter, how do I get my kid to shoot great? I always tell them, listen, the answer's not sexy. It's not glamorous. When he's not here, he's got a ball and he's at a hoop someplace and he's shooting, and he's doing it with a purpose. And I think with this that you're showing me, I think that, it gives the head coach or whoever's running this, obviously the head coach is coming down from, the ability to show kids nowadays, how to practice with high value away from the gym when the coach isn't there.
Yeah, so what we're looking at now on the screen is kind of a sample tournament of how this shooting league would conclude. And if you have a lot of participation, you may need to group players together to form teams to shoot in the competition. If you're a little bit thin on personnel, you could have players compete individually. but I like the idea of it all building up to something, right? It's building up to this competition where there's a champion crowned, where you can make a big spectacle of it, where you have all your shooters and they're going in a tournament style, where maybe you're using all 6 hoops to run your competition in a gym, and it's all thinning out to the top 2 shooters getting to come and go head to head. Maybe they're shooting at the same time on different baskets with a lot of the other players around watching and cheering. So I see big potential here as just something that could be tremendous for enthusiasm for a basketball program. So any final thoughts on this shooting league before we get into our next, which would be our Little Dribblers program, Coach?
No, I mean, I'm just, as you're sitting there talking, I'm trying to imagine the players that I've had that could really shoot it on my better teams and how much fun they would have had with that. And kind of the talk and the smack talk back and forth that we'd have been listening to, and the enthusiasm that would have generated. I can't tell you. I mean, I can't stress enough how I'm not even sure the word's impressed with how interested I am in running that that shooting league. I mean, that's an incredible idea. I love it.
Yeah, so we're teaching a foundational skill that's going to benefit the varsity level. It's creating enthusiasm throughout the lower levels. And then you can turn it into a fundraiser if it really has legs in your program. But one of the interesting things to me with it is you can develop these kind of staple shooting drills that you teach your players, and then they can execute them with a partner or by themselves, but they all know the structure and the framework. And I can just imagine the kid that's been running these drills by themselves or with a partner for 5 years in a lead up to being a varsity basketball player, and they finally get to your varsity practices and they already know your stuff because you have staple practice concepts of how they've worked on their shooting, and you could build on that and advance it, or just reap the rewards of having great program organization.
Yeah, I mean, the other way I'm looking at that, Coach, too, is I'm picturing that tournament game where you're down 9 points in the fourth quarter, and instead of being cooked, you've got 3 guys on the floor that can light up 9 points in about 40 seconds and still be in the game. So that's a great piece, man. I really like the shooting league. Excellent stuff.
Yeah, so that's the number 1 on the Big 5 program builders that I would install if I was taking over a high school basketball program today. And it's a shooting league. And Little Dribblers, which you said you were a big fan of, is what we're going to talk about next. So we both have experience in personally running a Little Dribblers program. And one of the interesting things with a Little Dribblers program is you really can't do it if you're the varsity coach, because the Little Dribblers program is going to perform at halftime of the varsity games. So you need to find someone to run this program for you, which is no easy task. But every program that I've been in, and I'd imagine you have been in, you can find people, whether it's somebody in your extended coaching staff, a parent, or someone in the community that would love to take on some responsibility, especially if you pitched it with it being a big deal for the future of your program. So if we don't know what a Little Dribblers program is, if you can't envision it in your head, I'm going to put one up on the screen so we can watch a performance here, Coach. And we can talk over top of the video, but we're going to look at Randy Montgomery's Hoover Vikings teams here, where he had this program really rolling. And Randy is the best that I've seen at doing this, where he put this program together. It ran for a long time, and he built so much enthusiasm in his community by doing this. But what we're looking at here is a sample performance from the Little Dribblers program. So a Little Dribblers program basically is you're getting your youth players, so up until 6th grade if you'd like to, but anywhere from kindergarten through 6th grade, to take on additional ball handling practice beyond whatever they would be doing at their youth levels. And they would learn a ball handling routine so that they can perform at halftime of your varsity games. So it becomes a big spectacle, and there's just so many side benefits to running a Little Dribblers program like this. And a couple of them would be that you get your youth players comfortable handling a basketball. So obviously your varsity players, you're probably not doing a ton of skill work where it's like stationary dribbling or things of that nature. If you're doing that with your 12th graders, it's probably not a good sign. But if they can master all of those fundamentals when they're in first, second, third, and fourth grade, then they've got a great foundation as ball handlers to work with moving forward. So you're building some enthusiasm and some ball handling skills at your younger levels, but you're also pumping up your community so that when it's game night for the varsity, you've got all of these kids coming to the game. They're experiencing the varsity atmosphere. They're demonstrating their skills. And I don't know many first, second, third, fourth, fifth, or sixth graders that drive. So somebody's got to bring these kids to their performance. So you're ultimately building up a crowd for your game by having these kids perform at halftime of the varsity game. You're getting butts in seats. You're getting buy-in from the community. You're getting buy-in from the parents where they're seeing what you've got going on and they're excited for their kid to be a part of it. And they are actively at the game, watching their kid perform, buying a program, buying from the concession stand, getting involved in the 50-50 raffle. There's just so many benefits to running a program like this. So, Coach, any preliminary thoughts here on the Little Dribblers program?
I mean, I think this sells itself. Number one, look at what's going on there. And again, I think you mentioned it would be, it would be remiss not to again mention Randy Montgomery for being the best I've ever seen at doing this. I mean, this was his vision. And because I worked with Randy on several projects, I know that he actually got this from a school in Pennsylvania. And the guy who was running that program's last name was Miller. And the first time he ever saw, Coach Montgomery ever saw this at halftime of a game was when that Coach Miller was running this. He brought his group with him here to Ohio when they played Canton McKinley over at the Fieldhouse. And the main little dribbler in that organization at the time was a guy named Sean Miller, who, that kind of speaks for itself, right? Played at Pitt, has coached at Xavier and then coached at Arizona and then at Xavier again. And I believe he's back at Texas. So, I mean, this thing is deeply rooted in basketball success. And, you mentioned all those things. I was, as you were mentioning them, I was thinking, right? All of them, butts in the seats, building skill. Another one here that I always think of, and you may have mentioned this, but like kind of more directly, you're getting those kids involved. They're on the floor in front of a varsity crowd on a Friday night. Yeah. And so by the time they get there to you, the ones that come through that program and continue to play basketball, they're never going to tense up in front of a crowd because they've been doing it since they were, like you said, 6 years old. There's just so much good about this that it would be impossible to talk about all of it. And if you look at it too, some of them are really, really tricky with what they're doing, but a lot of this is just basic stuff. It's not Curly Neal stuff, right? But it's highly coordinated. And really, so the basketball acumen of the person running it doesn't have to be professional level. He just has to be able to coordinate these kids and take some pride in what they're going to do in front of the crowd on a Friday night. So I've personally never had a problem finding a guy. Obviously they come with various levels of basketball understanding, but like just somebody that's going to have some real enthusiasm for that program and make it their own and make it something to be proud of. That's what you're looking for.
Yeah, so typically how these works is it works off of a whistle system. So you have one director and they're just kind of blowing the whistle and that kind of triggers the kids to go into the next routine. So you're teaching a 3-minute or 5-minute dribbling routine. And each time they hear the whistle, they're just going to switch into the next ball handling drill. But you can structure it in a way where your best ball handlers might be doing some more advanced tricks and your starter type of players that don't have much experience with basketball or handling the ball can be doing a lot of the basic things. So there's room for your best players to get more advanced drills, and for your players that don't have much experience, they can still participate. But, you're talking about how big is a basketball court, you're trying to fill it up with kids. You can take participation from kids that aren't very experienced and involve them in something like this to help grow their skills and keep them involved. And you can create a great atmosphere for your community to enjoy during halftime of your home games. But just thinking about the benefits of this, I know that we talked about it a little bit already, but a couple other things here is you can identify who really loves basketball in your youth program. There's going to be kids that stand out as basketball, and you can tag them and follow them through their playing careers and nurture them along. You get those players mastering those basic ball handling skills early on, so you don't have to worry about it when they're in high school or when they're in middle school. You're getting these players their own kind of community themed ball. So they've got an orange and black ball that they're taking home that is their performance ball. And every time they're shooting with it in the driveway, it's a reminder that they're tied into that local community. You're getting kids that really love the game. You're getting them to associate with each other. So the kids that kind of stand out, they can identify each other and bond with each other, where you're starting some of those pairings that are become so valuable as kids move up, where they're connected to each other and they're not just meeting each other when they're on the freshman team together or on the JV team together. They're meeting each other at an earlier age, and that applies to the parents as well. I think you can use your director of this very strategically. If you place somebody in there that's got great rapport with kids, obviously you have to find someone first, but if you can find someone or get someone to do it, that's really good building rapport with kids. That's going to tie them in even tighter to your program. We had talked about it earlier, but you're getting the kids exposure to that varsity atmosphere at an early age, so that when they're, varsity players, they're not scared to be on a stage getting watched by a lot of people. And you get the parents to the varsity games prior to their kids being of age to participate. You get your youth parents spending money at the concession stand. You get your youth parents getting to know each other to form ongoing relationships. So the benefits of this are just massive if you can pull it off. And, it is a lot to execute well, but it's so worth it if you can pull it off. Coach, any thoughts on any of that?
Yeah, for anybody that tries this, and I think everybody should. I mean, if I'm a head basketball coach again, in my career, at every stop, this was where one of the first things that we implemented, outside of the varsity and JV gym. You have to do it. In my opinion, if you're going to be there long term and you're really trying to build something, that's number one. Number two, understand it's not going to look like what you're seeing on video here when you first start to do it. I always, when I'm working with coaches around the country, and I interact with, dozens of coaches on a weekly basis who've, kind of worked through some of my products. And we talk about stuff like this. A lot of times I hear them say, well, these kids just aren't very good at that. Well, they're not going to be right away, right? And the person that's running the program probably isn't going to be really great at it right away. It's something that's going to have to grow over time. So, start with your long-term vision, and then create some short-term goals. Right? Maybe a little bit shorter halftime program with just some basic things. Make sure it's something that can be handled, and it's something that looks really good when you put it out in front of people, so that it continues to build. And you just have to be patient. It's like anything else. You have to be patient with it, because if you're not, it won't fly. So those are just a couple, extra things that I would kind of toss in there. One other thing I would say is you've got some other opportunities there. You can see that they're all dressed in the same gear. You got a chance to get some sponsorship on those T-shirts and those basketballs as well. There's some different money-making ideas that can stem from that program, that also will continue to get the community more and more involved in your program.
Yeah, and this is not an expensive program to run. Your costs are really a T-shirt, pair of shorts, and a basketball. Other than that, you're really just looking to, find a director. The investment for the players is really like one additional practice per week. So it's not a huge investment in terms of what you're asking for from your kids here. So that's one of the notable things. And then what we've talked about with the shooting league, there's some similarities in, once you get it rolling, you can turn it into a kind of a for-profit, if you'd like, where it's a revenue generator. So we're talking about, there's halftime, you've got 10 or 11 home games, and you've got a basketball court that doesn't change size, and you need enough room on the court for the players to be able to execute their drills. So if you can fill up your basketball court, It might be a free thing for people to participate or a very low cost thing. But once you get demand, you can start building it into something that's a revenue generator for your program. So not only do you get all the benefits of the things that we've talked about, you may be able to make a buck or two, and that really serves you a purpose because you can only have so much space to fill on your basketball court. There's only so many players that you can jam in there, and if you're getting that kind of demand, you can raise your prices and turn it into something that's raising money for your basketball program there, Coach.
Right.
Okay, we're going to move on from the Little Dribblers program. I thought that was a really nice segment where we're going to get into kind of our third thing here. Okay, one more thing to look at. This would be kind of the take-home workout that you would give your kids. So you've got the one additional practice that you're running, but this is one of those benefits where you're sending your kids home, they're learning this routine for the performance, but it's benefiting them as ball handlers where they're doing this work on their own. They're learning one ball dribbling, two ball dribbling, and all that kind of stuff. So there's more detail in here about how to structure the performance, what drills to use, what recommendations and all that. But we'll leave that here for the guide. And what we'll talk about next is a tip-off dinner. This is something that I've done every year of my coaching career. Have you done much with tip-off dinners, Coach?
But yeah, I have. I mean, I've done a number of them. You usually like to bring a speaker in. The last one I did, I had Butch Reynolds, who was the 1996 Olympic gold medalist in the 4x400 relay at the Seoul Olympics. Butch was a player for my dad. My dad was the head basketball coach at Archbishop Hoban, and Butch Reynolds was a basketball player above everything else when he went off to high school, and found out during his time in high school that he was a great track star and went off and did some amazing things in that, went to Ohio State, the Olympics, the whole nine. So being able to bring in a speaker with some background in athletics at a high level, tied to basketball on some level is something I think that has some value with that. And then also being able to speak, as the coach to a community, especially a new community, if you're a new coach at a program. And then there's some other ways to kind of make some maybe some money for your program with some silent auction items and things like that. And again, it's another way to get the community involved, and it's something that I definitely believe deeply in, and I've done it with varying levels of success depending on where I've been. At times we've modified that and we've turned it into a tip-off dinner / meet the teams exhibition game. Yep. With our last scrimmage. So like I'll kind of just throw that out there, and you can run from there, Coach. And then if you have some questions on how I modify things, you can jump in and ask me back.
Yeah, so the tip-off dinner is fabulous because it hits multi-directional within your community. And one of the biggest factors is the timing of it. The timing is, before your games have started, right after you've picked your teams. If you have like a month preseason from your tryouts to your first game, you might be running it a week or two in advance of your first game. But the cyclical nature of a basketball schedule creates the most good feelings in the community at this time of the year, where you haven't played a game, you haven't lost a game, everybody's excited about what could happen for the season, and you can really capitalize on that with your community's enthusiasm for participating in a tip-off dinner, for opening their wallets and spending if there's a fundraiser element to your tip-off dinner. But there's a lot of excitement going on. So you had talked about some different ways to structure it, and I've done different things with it through the years. I think talking about a featured speaker might be a good starting point. And, we'd seen this from Randy Montgomery, and his thing was he liked to pay a celebrity to come down and be the featured speaker. So yeah. I think one year he might have had Jerry Tarkanian come down from UNLV. Coach Montgomery was very well connected, so he could bring these people in, but he would pay them out of the booster club, and that became a draw for people in the community to come listen to a speaker. So Coach Montgomery was really connected to a Hall of Fame baseball pitcher. Who's that Hall of Fame baseball pitcher he would bring down? Coach
Dean Chance, who went to Northwestern High School in Wayne County, which is where Triway High School is, and Coach made friends with him during his time at Triway.
So he had Dean Chance come in, he had Jerry Tarkanian, but he'd have like a celebrity that would be a draw for people. So that's a kind of expanding this into your basketball community to the community at large when you have that celebrity element. And what
Yeah,
I
no,
would like to do is I would like to bring in like a historical figure from the program's past. So I might have, I had Steve Barr when I was at Aquinas. He was the featured speaker, and most people won't know who Steve Barr is, but he was a multi-sport athlete from Aquinas that went on to Purdue, and he was the quarterback at Purdue. At Glen Oak, I had Jim Nicodemo be the featured speaker. Jim Nicodemo was the basketball coach at Glen Oak, but he moved on to be the superintendent of schools through Stark County for all of Stark County. I had the Fox brothers, Derek and Dustin Fox, be the featured speakers one year. Derek played football at Penn State. Dustin played football at Ohio State, and both of them, I think, had at least a cup of coffee in the NFL. But you're giving an opportunity to celebrate the history of your program. You're recognizing the achievements of the past through your featured speaker, and you're gaining some networking and connections to these people because they're prominent people that have accomplished things in the community. They're going to go up there and they're going to talk about their career, but they're also going to say nice things about the program. And if you ever need a favor, any of those people are going to take your call and be willing to listen and want to help the program, whether it's a donation or an appearance or whatever it would be. You're really just laying a great networking foundation by inviting those people back and honoring them. So there's kind of two approaches, but you definitely want to have a featured speaker. And what it would look like is what we typically done is we would have the freshman coach come up and talk about the freshman team a little bit. We'd have the JV coach maybe come up and talk about that level. The varsity coach would get up there and lay the expectations for the season and talk about the team and the program. And then your featured speaker would be last there. So there's going to be a dinner element to this. So there's a couple different routes that you could go with this. And I've done different things. I've had dinners catered in where each family would pay a ticket fee and then we would provide them dinner. And you could charge more if you have like a celebrity speaker, but maybe you're charging each family, $30 or something like that, and then their whole family gets to eat a meal. Or you could do something where it's like a potluck dinner, where you would assign different levels of the program to take care of different things, and it becomes kind of a community thing where, in this example, your varsity and your JV are going to bring main dishes. Your freshmen's got side dishes. Your 8th grade, your 7th grade are going to cover desserts and drinks. Your coaches are going to bring plates, napkins, and utensils. And through all that, you've got all of your bases covered. So with that, you just kind of want to think about your numbers, because a varsity team and a junior varsity team, those two combined is probably only 25 families. Whereas like our freshmen would be 15 families. Our 8th grade, we could have 40 up to probably 45 kids between 4 teams, 2 7th and 2 8th. So you just want to think about those things in terms of numbers and participation levels to make sure you have enough of everything for your dinner. But before your dinner, you could do something where you try to demonstrate the program to the community. So what you would be looking to do is what you talked about. You could have like an open practice session where the community could watch your coaching staff work with your kids. So the gym's open, the bleachers are pulled out, parents can come, they can watch you practice, they can understand how you talk to their kids, what a practice looks like. And I've found that doing something like that is a great relief to a lot of the parents if they just understand how you communicate and how you run your practices, how you run your drills. That can alleviate a lot of situations later on in the year just because you're opening yourself up, you're being vulnerable, and you're building trust with those parents. One of the things that I've liked to do was do inter squad scrimmages for people to watch. So you might have, we would have 2 7th grade teams. So you might have your 7th grade team play the other 7th grade team. And that might just be in a 1 8-minute quarter or something like that. And then your freshmen play your JV, and then your varsity plays your varsity. And you've got kind of 3 like mini scrimmages there where everybody's invited to this gym portion of it, but they're all getting to see their kids participate in some kind of exhibition on the court. So any thoughts on any of that in terms of structuring the meal or putting on a gym presentation for your community, Coach?
Yeah, you have to know your community, Matt. I think one of the important things is with Brandy at when he went to North Canton Hoover, his was a I don't want to say expensive, but it was a little bit fancier meal, and the ticket was a little more expensive. But like you said, he was bringing in a celebrity speaker. The year I worked with him, he brought in Jimmy Chitwood from the famous movie
Yeah.
Hoosiers, and
Uh-huh.
his Jimmy Chitwood's real name is actually Bobby Plump. And he was the dude, all right, that did all the things that Chitwood did in that movie. And he came in and he spent a day with the team, and Randy would have a VIP room prior to the meal, where you pay a little extra, and there was an open bar that went with the ticket, and you could hang out with whoever his celebrity was, whether it be, like you said, Jerry Tarkanian. I know he had Jim Thome in there one year, and Jim Thome had a bunch of signed baseballs that he passed out. I've got one over my left shoulder in my trophy case back there from that event. So you gotta, if you're going to go that route, you've got to have a community that can support it, right? Otherwise you get caught holding the bag, spending too much money, and kind of overshooting. Hoover's a community that can handle that type of thing. Typically with me, I'm more like you with the local celebrity. You mentioned the name Steve Barr. You said nobody would know him. I do. I played men's travel softball with Steve Barr out of a little tavern there in Canton called the Freeway Tavern for several years back in the early 2000s. Great guy, Steve Barr. Fantastic high school athlete. Went on to quarterback at Purdue. Had a lot of obviously a lot of positive feelings when he probably came back and spoke for you, a guy of that stature that had done some great things in his athletic career. Good dude. Some of the other people you mentioned, I definitely recognize. That's really I think at a smaller school, or when you're just getting this thing started, I think that's probably the way to go. And again, if you can mix it with an inter-squad scrimmage, or even what I called my Meet the Teams exhibition game, where we actually brought in Cleveland Benedictine the year after we lost to them by a point in the regionals in 2007, invited them to our gym for our last scrimmage, and we went full uniforms, played two halves, wiped the score at halftime, so it didn't turn into a trying to beat them thing, but just a getting better thing, and then invited them into the meal afterwards, and all the speaking that you were talking about. Some of the players got to speak. I spoke about our team in the previous season, and it was just a really good way to get the community excited about basketball before basketball even started. So, there are a number of different ways. With that particular one, we had a local restaurant that served Italian food, cater in the meal with pasta and pizza and antipasta and things like that. Listen, there's no losing when that stuff happens. And with that particular event, we brought Benedictine in. We didn't charge for the game, but we left a gate there, and we just asked for people to make donations if they wanted to. And we probably made more money on that event, fundraising, than any other event that we've ever made fundraising, because when people donate, some people don't donate anything, but some people take out $20, $50 at times, and it's a chance for people to contribute to your program in a low stakes, low pressure way. And it just feels good for everybody. It just connects community to program.
Yeah, I think that you hit it on the head right there. If you do this event right, it feels like a night out of entertainment for your families in your program, as opposed to feeling like a chore. A lot of times we do fundraisers or we do events, and people feel obligated to go, but you can build excitement around this where there's a lot of entertainment value, and you would be spending the same amount of money that you would spend to take your family on a night out to a movie or something like that, and you're pulling that into your basketball program, as opposed to them spending that money at the mall or a restaurant or a movie theater. But we talked about the timing of it being really good, the tip-off timing, where there's a lot of good feelings in the community. We talked about how to kind of structure the dinner portion of it and how to structure the entertainment portion of it. But I wanted to touch base on the fundraising element, which if you really do this right, this could be like the singular fundraiser that you run all year round. You can pull in enough money. And
Absolutely.
some philosophies that you could use is a simple like 50-50 method, where you've got people selling tickets going around. to the different tables. You can do basket raffles and silent auctions. So we would do this a ton, where we would have our parent group kind of organize themes of products, put it in a basket. The people that are at the dinner would buy tickets to the basket raffle. They put tickets into whatever basket that they want to win, and then you draw a winner at the end of the night. You can do a silent auction where maybe you get some memorabilia donated, and then you're having bidding wars on who gets to take the poster home. I know that at Glen Oak, they would do a huge auction each year. They'd get most of the stuff donated, and they would raise thousands and thousands of dollars with people bidding on silent auction items. A lot of that was memorabilia, autographs, jerseys, and things like that. But you can definitely just have your parent group put together baskets of lottery tickets or a trip, so you'll find somebody in your program that has a vacation house that they'll give away for a weekend, or there's a lot of different themes that you can use to generate these baskets. And then once you have them out there, people will spend money to buy tickets or to bid on them individually. Yeah. So here's a flyer of when I ran a tip-off dinner with the Fox boys as the featured guests. So we had an inter-squad scrimmage. We had a period where they were bidding on raffle baskets and 50-50. We had a covered dish dinner. We had the coaches talk about their teams. We had our celebrity guests do a brief speech, and then we had our basket raffle winners all draw it out. So, if you're taking in the scrimmage, this could be a long night, maybe, 3 hours. But we were doing free family entrance. All you had to do is bring a covered dish. Any wrapping thoughts on a tip-off dinner before we move into the next thing here, Coach?
Yeah, man, you walked me down memory lane there, Matt, with a lot of things. Back to my early days of coaching, the older Fox, I think it was Derek, was a heck of a basketball player at Glen Oak too.
Yep.
One of my first games as an assistant on the bench when I was a JV coach at Canton South my first year, he went baseline like any kid would drive the baseline in a high school game. He's only about 5'10", and he jumped up and off of 2 feet and dunked with 2 hands on 3 of our guys. And I thought, wow, that's an incredible athlete. Aside from that, great ideas with our Meet the Teams night where we mixed that with the dinner. We turned it into like an NBA atmosphere during the exhibition game. The timeouts were extended, and we had some kind of fundraising going on just about every time the clock stopped or there was an end of a quarter. I know there was a 50-50 raffle in the first half and the second half. We had a $100 3-point shot that we ran at the end of the first and third quarters. Where it was $5 to put your name in a hat, and we drew out 2 or 3 people to shoot these 3-point. And so our timeouts were crazy, right? We're in these huddles, and the fans are going nuts because there's people that can't shoot a basketball that are trying to make a 3-point shot for $100. And my uncle has floor tickets to Cavaliers games. At the time, the Cavs had LeBron, right, when he was there the first time. My uncle that owns the construction company up in Cleveland. So we raffled off 4 floor seats in a hotel room. It was the only fundraiser we did that year, Coach. It took a lot of kind of organizing and collaborating, and a lot of people were involved in it. But I would be lying if I told you the amount of money. I don't remember, but we didn't need another fundraiser, and it was an amazing night to launch our season. So I just think it's a win-win, and then another win when you put together a night like that.
So we're moving on to the fourth thing here of the Big 5 program builders, and these are the 5 things that I would do if I was taking over a high school basketball program today. And the fourth one would be to install staple concepts. So staple concepts deal directly with your basketball scheme and how that filters down from the varsity level to your youth levels. So what you don't want to have is you come into a program, you're rushing around to get all the things done that you need to get done. And you've got your varsity team is running a fast break offense and a press defense. But your 7th grade teams are using a 2-3 zone and a continuity patterned offense. So you want to get everybody on the same page with the strategy involved. And that doesn't look the same at every level, but it should have common threads that are present at every level. So for example, you're not looking to have 100 different things that are staple concepts. You might only have 3, 4, 5, 6. It's got to be a manageable number that you can kind of implement at different levels. And what this looks like here is, I think I give an example here in the guide is, I'm a circle motion guy. So I had ran circle motion as our base offense for years. And you can learn circle motion in a progression where your seventh graders might only know the basic pattern of circle motion, but then they're building on it at each level up to varsity. So circle motion would be a staple concept in the program. The seventh graders aren't going to learn all the bells and whistles that the varsity might know, but they're learning the foundational pieces and they're picking up bits and parts of it at each level of the program. So by the time they get to varsity, they're practically masters at it, and you can just polish it up real nice. But they've had this foundational teaching, and what you'd want to choose here is you're deciding on your style of play, and then you're implementing at each level. So if 5-out is the circle motion alignment, and maybe at your youth levels you're having those teams use a 5-out alignment, but not necessarily even run circle motion, but they're getting comfortable with 5-out. And then they're learning the basic circle motion pattern at seventh grade. And then at eighth grade, they're learning how to fast break into the circle motion. And in the ninth grade, they're learning set plays that happen out of circle motion. At the junior varsity, they're learning counters to the common ways teams guard it. And then you've got this really nice progression of learning a system all the way up. So what I'm an advocate for, and what I would do with these staple programs, staple packages here, is to pick maybe 3, 4, 5 things at the most and have a progression where they're learning those things at the lower grades and they build on one another. And it mirrors the style of play that you plan to run at the varsity level. So the same kind of progression that we talked about with circle motion, you could do that with a pressing style of defense. You could do that with out of bounds plays. You could do that with a set play package. So there's all kinds of opportunities. But what's important is that you pick what style of play that you want, and that you are able to stick with it, because you don't want to do all this work to have those kids get up to the varsity level, and then all of a sudden you're now a dribble drive motion team. So any thoughts on building these staple concepts into a basketball program?
Absolutely, man. I think it's one of the most important jobs of a head coach to coordinate what you're talking about, these staple concepts, and coordinate them all the way down to, with the schools in Ohio, obviously you manage school teams on down to seventh grade. So, I mean, I want my seventh grade team, doing the same basic things that I'm going to ask my varsity team to be doing. I always compare it to math, right? In seventh grade, it would be like a pre-algebra level of that stuff. By the time they get to the varsity level at high school, if they've been in the program for 5 years, it should be ramped up to the calculus level in those concepts, right? You can't get to the calculus level without those lower levels. And so, each year you want to add something to what they're able to do with each of those staple concepts. The bottom line is that if you're not doing that every single year, you're going to have to start from scratch with a brand new group. And that makes it really, really hard to prepare for a season. And it puts you behind teams that use this type of system of kind of the ladder system of, first this, then this, then this. And by the time you get to me, right, we really go along with it. So, yeah, I mean, I'm a huge believer in that. I've done that everywhere I've been. I think you touched on it a little bit. There's nothing more frustrating as a head coach than, knowing that we're going to be a man-to-man team, for example, right? And that we're going to run up and down the floor, in what we call our run and stun fire transition. And then going into my seventh grade game and watching my seventh grade coach stand in a 2-3 zone and walk the ball up the floor. It's not helpful, right? So it's not just about setting up what you want them to teach. It's making sure that you follow through with those coaches and hold them accountable for teaching it, right? Those are important things as a head coach. And sometimes they can lead to some unpleasant, uncomfortable conversations with coaches at lower levels, but you've got to get the right guys in place down there doing those things if you ever want to be good and be able to sustain it.
Yeah, if you don't have something like this, you're trying to build, your system building all into like a 2-3 year window at the most with your kids. If you're able to execute this, you're broadening it out to 7 or 8 years where they have time to learn these concepts over time. So just another example, we talked about circle motion, but here's an example for the defensive side of the ball. You might have your 7th and 8th grade use a 2-3 zone as their base defense, but once they get to the freshman year, they have the 2-3 zone as their base defense, but now they can do a point blitz option and a wing blitz trap option. Mm-hmm. Then at the junior varsity level, they use their 2-3 zone as their base defense. They have the wing trap and the point trap, but they can also roll the 2-3 up the court to make a 2-2-1 3/4 court press that rolls back into your 2-3. And then at the varsity level, you're doing all those things, but you're adding that you can morph the 2-3 zone into man-to-man on a certain trigger pass or after a certain amount of passes. So that would be kind of a progression that a coach might use. I've never done this with 2-3 zone, but that's a sample of how you would scale a progression over time. So you touched on this a little bit. How do you get this accomplished? You need buy-in from your coaching staff at your lower levels. So obviously you would have like a coaches meeting at the beginning of the year where you're kind of laying out this vision. You're giving them a packet that says, here's the things that you're responsible for teaching the kids at your level. You have some kind of oversight where you're either directly connected to the coaches with follow-up on how it's going. You're popping into games and making sure things are going the way that you want them to. And I never really wanted to just dominate my youth coaches and mandate everything that they did. There's certainly wiggle room for them to make decisions for what's best for their team. But at a baseline, I do need a foundation built for the things that they need to learn growing up. So you've got this coaches meeting where you're bringing all your youth coaches together. You're ordering them pizza. You demonstrate some drills for them on the court. They have access to you where you can talk and communicate to them. But another feature that I've had a lot of success with was creating a position called the Director of Youth Basketball Operations. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And sometimes I would have like an assistant on my varsity or high school staff kind of go between levels. But the best success that I've had with this was when I had like a volunteer that wanted to be involved, and basically they served as quality control for all the different levels. So they might pop into a 7th grade game or an 8th grade practice or a freshman practice. And, they are working with the coaches there to make sure the right things are getting installed, that we're not having a coach go rogue and just doing things that are completely counter to what we're trying to accomplish with our progression. But I've had some really good director of youth basketball operations through the years, and they basically just make sure things are getting done the way that they need to get done. So there's been times where there's been some conflict where like, I don't want this guy coming into my practice. And usually with some conversation, you can make a decision, you can smooth that over or decide just to, give it up at that point. But for the most part, these coaches are generally receptive to having more help at their level. And if you have a stubborn coach through the years, that's not that big of a deal. But over the course of time, you're really building a strong foundation, and you have some checks and balances if you're able to appoint a person to do this DOIBO position. Have you heard of a director of youth basketball operations before?
Yeah, but listen, I had a director of basketball operations at a couple of schools that I went to. That's what I called them. They did some things for me at the varsity level, but they weren't reporting to every practice. They handled some media things with some of my better teams. They handled statistics and things that went out. But their main job was, like you said, to coordinate at those lower levels where I couldn't be there. That actually happened at Fairless for the first time, where I had 2 different assistant coaches that had some conflicts in their lives that weren't going to allow them to be at every practice. One of them took the head baseball job, and he just flat out told me, man, I feel like I'd cheat my baseball team if I was at basketball every single day. So I split a stipend and told him, you're the director of basketball ops, sit with us on game nights and help us with stats and media relations, and be my guy that goes down and oversees the things that are going on at the youth levels, and anything else that kind of is that peripheral work that head coaches have a hard time doing when they're teaching 6 classes, especially, right? And he was great at it. It actually worked out really, really well. And then I had that again when I was down in Georgia, because we had so many players down there that were being recruited by high level guys. We had more money to put more hands involved, and I had a director of basketball ops down there too, and it's invaluable. I mean, it's like in a lot of ways, it's more valuable than an assistant coach could be.
Yeah, so we're moving on to the fifth thing in our 5-part series here, where we're talking about the Big Five program builders. We're talking about what I would do if I was taking over a high school basketball program today. And this is number 5. So number 5 is establishing program pillars, where if we think about our staple concepts, we're thinking about scheme first and foremost. How do we want to play? What's our play style? And how do we build a foundation at our lower levels for kids to be prepared to play in that system when they get to the higher levels? With your pillars, you're talking more about your goals. You're talking more about your culture. So you're trying to identify the things in your program that are important, and you're filtering these down to your lower levels, where if you've dictated a play style to them, we're going to use circle motion, we're going to use 2-3 zone, we're going to press. There's things that associate with those concepts that are going to make them more effective. So this is an exact of pillars that I've used in my coaching career, where we had 3 pillars. We're going to apply pressure, and that's when we were using a denial and disrupt type of defense. So we're going to disrupt teams' offenses. We're going to attack, which means we're going to push the pace in transition, and we're going to try to get into the paint, and we're going to be ball strong, which is all of our fundamentals, how we teach pivoting, passing, catching, stopping, decision making. So with each of these 3 pillars, there would be things that would be filtered down to each level of the program so that they could work on these things. And it might be tied to a game goal, like we're going to get this many deflections or this many turnovers, where we can apply those goals at the 7th grade level in a modified version, but they're all trying to go for the same thing here. So we've got our 3 pillars: apply pressure, attack, and ball strong. And what those would be is it's a mentality in an identity that we want to have program wide. So there's different ways that you could do this at each level of the program, but basically you're getting each level of the program to have a similar mentality. So to apply pressure, we would use a denial man-to-man system, a diamond press, and a 1-3-1 as our kind of our pressure system. So not that every level of the program has to run those concepts, but we're looking for the same kind of things from each level of the program, where we're putting pressure on the opponent, and we're doing it through a defensive system, where we could use some of these schemes, or only use one of them maybe at the lower levels. Is this making sense? And Coach, are you able to differentiate your staple concepts from your program pillars?
Oh, I mean, absolutely. I think there's a major connection here to the last one, really, that you were talking about, with the kind of that ladder system of taking the things that you want done at the varsity level and making sure that it's filtered down so they get a taste of it when they're in 7th grade. But I think that it's really important by the time those kids get to you after 5-6 years in the program, that they have a pretty good idea of what the identity of the program is. It's funny because it takes on a different life everywhere you go. When I was at Fairless, I mean, a lot of the parents that had kids coming up just called it Kramer ball. You know what I mean? That we were going to do certain things, and it was true. You know what I mean? We were gonna play fast and be on the attack on offense all the time. We were gonna assault the 3-point line. I mean, that's what we were gonna really utilize that, the ability to shoot the basketball for 3 points at a high level. And our fundamental system of play was, what kids started with when they were in kindergarten, with the landing on 2 feet, the 2 pivots that we taught, the arch, the sweep, and all those things. And so, boiling that down to 3 pillars, I really like. I don't know that I ever did that specifically, but I like it. And I think it's a great way to articulate to everybody in the program. I guess back to what I was saying about Kramer ball. What is Kramer ball? You know what I mean? Well, here's the 3 things that you're talking about when you say that. And those weren't my words; those were somebody else's. But that would be maybe the way that I would quantify it.
Yeah, so if we establish these 3 pillars of our, this establishes our mentality, this establishes our identity, and then we have ways to work on them. So if we're going to talk about being an attacking team, We're going to have suggested drills that create this attack mentality, that create a transition offense where we're able to score in transition and put pressure on teams. If we're talking about being ball strong, we've got suggested drills to be able to teach fundamentals. So there's a thread line here from establishing an identity, teaching the players and coaches ways to work on them at the youth levels and on up. And then the final piece of this is we've got to be able to measure it, because if we're just talking about applying pressure with no way to measure whether we're applying pressure, we really don't have much there. But when you tie it all together with goals, like game goals, then you really have something. So in our system at the varsity level, to quantify whether we've applied pressure, we're looking for to cause 16 turnovers at least, and get 20 plus deflections over the course of a game. So we can sit there and look at this stat sheet after the game and said, did we apply pressure with our defense the way that we wanted to? If these numbers reflect it, then we can be proud of our ability to apply pressure. So same kind of thing here. How do we quantify whether we had an attack mentality? Well, we want to score 10 or more points in our transition breaks. We want to have 25 points of paint points, and we want to get 13 or more free throw attempts. Same thing with ball strong. How do we quantify whether we were ball strong or not? Did we have 12 or fewer turnovers? Did we have five or fewer live ball turnovers? So we can look at the stat sheet and kind of rate how we're going. So, obviously the pace of a game is going to change these numbers. So it's not a perfect system. A smaller possession game, it's going to be easier to, have 12 or fewer turnovers. A higher possession game, it's going to be easier to create more turnovers. But we've got to have a quantifiable way to measure our mentality and our identity. Doing it through game goals is certainly one way to do that. And this can be scaled down to be used at the lower levels, where obviously it's a shorter game. It's a different game in 7th grade than it is varsity, but maybe there's one stat metric that the coaches could use to consider whether they applied pressure, attacked, or were ball strong. So that's going to wrap it, Coach. Any thoughts here on establishing these program pillars before we sign off here?
No, I mean, the numbers you were using are almost identical to the ones I was using. One of the other ones that we've tossed in, and I don't know why this number came up, but as we did the analyzing of stats, we found that when we made 11 or more 3-point shots, most places I've been, that we won those games. So, one of our goals was to make 11. Obviously more would be great. The turnover thing, I think, is an interesting thing with you, with the run and stun up and down concept. It can lead to more turnovers. The better you get at it, actually it's a little easier to execute running full court because you don't have people in your face all the time. But we always felt like 12 or less was a great number for us too. We felt like if we could limit to 12 when we played up and down like that, we were probably going to win the game, because it was going to be a high possession game. So some of the things you were talking about there with the deflections, very similar numbers. I think those are great things. They're measurable things, like you said. There are things that you can put in front of your players and say, hey, listen, we talk about this, but we're not doing it. Or we talk about this and you did a great job with it, right? So that kids understand it's not just something you posted on the wall in your locker room. It's something that they should be living and aspiring to every time they step on the floor for you.
Yeah, and I picked these 5 things because of how they would connect together. So I think when you're thinking about your shooting league, you've got fundraising element, but you're building foundational skills and identity with your program, skill building on the shooting. And when you talk about your little dribblers, you're talking about addressing your youth program, building enthusiasm in your program, building enthusiasm in the community, and also developing a foundation of ball handling skills. When you talk about the tip-off dinner, you're talking about engaging your community, fundraising, and then your staple concepts and your program pillars are about establishing your identity and your style of play from the varsity down through your youth program. So all those things kind of work together. They establish different elements of your program, and in combination with one another, I believe it's kind of like an unstoppable program if you're trying to build a program like the ones that we've admired growing up, where you've watched someone stay at a program for a sustained period of time, build it up over time, and then reap the benefits as they graduate out of year 3, year 4, year 5. All of this is in place, and you just get to reap the rewards of it. Any closing thoughts here before we sign off, Coach?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think you make great points there, across the board, and I really, to any aspiring head high school basketball coach, somebody who's in the game now, or is an assistant wanting to get there, or maybe somebody who's chosen a coaching path recently and just started to kind of pick up on this. I would take these things into the interview, right? I'm sitting there, and I know the interviews that I've been in. They all kind of get to you asking you questions about these type of things. Walk into an interview with your big five there, and I think that you'll cover just about anything that an administrator would want in a head basketball coach, and show a great deal of organization in your thought process for what it's going to look like. And like you said, after year 1, after year 5, after year 8, it shows that you are there to grow roots. It shows that you're there for the long haul, and that you're there not just to win some basketball games, but just for the overall good of not just the players in the program, but the entire community. And I really enjoyed this, Coach. I mean, I sometimes I think it's great as coaches to just have these conversations, to kind of remind yourself of who you are and why you do this. And I think this is a really solid conversation that we had, and maybe reminding each other, and then hopefully helping others remind themselves of who they are and why they do this job.
Yeah, this has been enjoyable to talk about this structure, and I think that the true program builders out there are going to eat this stuff up. This is part of the advanced coaching course that you and I are building. We've got about 15 lessons set. This is one of the 15. And I look forward to, continue to tape these with you and get this into coaches' hands where they can see all the way from schemes and strategy to culture to program building, this advanced coaching course that we're building out come to life.
Hey, I just appreciate you letting me be a part of it, Matt. I feel like it's a way to impact the game, beyond coaching a program. And I hope that everybody that watches this feels like they got something out of it, because I feel like I became a better coach today. Thanks again for having me.
Hey, Coach, we've got some questions here. They're saying in the comments, where can I get this PDF? We'll put the PDF in the link here in the comments. Great stuff. Thank you, gentlemen. So we got some people watching us tape this, and they seem to be real appreciative of the things that we're doing. Hey, Coach, thank you so much. Let's connect again to tape another portion of this course, but we're signing off for now.
Thanks again, Matt. Have a great one.